Good morning. Good morning. I'm Paul Judge, and I'm the Chief Research Officer at Barracuda Networks. Barracuda spends our time providing some security products, networking, some storage products. We protect about 100,000 customers around the world. My role specifically is around Barracuda Labs, our security research group. There's a few areas where we spend time ranging from email to web security, to intrusion prevention, antivirus for our different products. But what I want to spend some time on today is what we've been seeing in the way of social networking threats. Right? So for the last couple of years, we've been spending a fair amount of time looking at kind of how are things morphing between email, between the web, and social networking, and kind of what are the latest things the attackers are up to. So what I want to spend some time on this morning is kind of walking through that and some of the things that we've seen and some of the technologies that we've been working on that we think kind of the industry would benefit from as a whole if we kind of collectively move in these directions, right? So if you look at last year, look at 2010, right? Everybody remembers, if you look back just 5 years ago, this is 2011, look back 2003. 2003, there was maybe 5% of email was spam, right? It's 5 to 10% of email was spam. Like, you might forget. You become so accustomed to spam being 90% of email, you forget that it wasn't always like that, right? So just 8 years ago, it was like 5 to 10% of email was spam, and it went to 20 and 30 and 40%, and it grew. And so nowadays, we're just accustomed to 90% of email being spam. Well, what happened last year, if you look at 2010, this weird thing happened where half the spam disappeared. So literally, so this is a view of the amount of spam showing up at Barracuda customers around the world. So if you look at the beginning of 2010, we were averaging about 50 billion spam messages per day that we were seeing show up at our customers. If you look from July to the end of the year, it literally went down to 26 billion. So half the spam disappeared. Right, so did all the spammers go skiing? Did all the spammers kind of go hang out, go hit a pub? No. So what happened is, think about it. You put yourself in the mindset of a spammer or attacker, someone trying to illegally make money from computer activity, right? They're a business. So they're like, okay, how can I make the most money? How can I make the most money? I have limited resources. I have some bots. I have some bandwidth. I have some computers. Like, how can I maximize my profits? And you think about it, I have some bots. What's the best thing to do with those? The spamming business is getting hard. It's been hard for a while, right? Because you're sending in spam and you're hitting some spam gateways. You're going to block 99% of those things. Then even the ones that go through, you might send in a spam folder. People might not read it. I barely can read my own real email. Like, I can't keep up with spam as well. So, the profit margins for spammers is getting worse and worse. And so they're looking at how do I make other ways of using these resources. I have these bots. I have this bandwidth. I have this code. How can I continue to make money on it? And so what we're seeing is, more and more so, they're moving over to kind of the web activities, right? They're moving over to where are the eyeballs? If I can't get in front of your eyeballs while you're reading your email, maybe I can get in front of your eyeballs while you're on a social network or while you're on a search engine. And so that's kind of what I want to dig into a little bit. To pardon my frequent coffee consumption. The night before last, I spent the night on an airplane. And last night, I spent it in a local club. So it was an improvement. However, it still didn't involve sleep. So if you look at the web, if you look at kind of all the activity that's happening on the web right now, one thing I want to touch on is kind of why is it happening? Like, what are the changes that are happening that's making it so easy for attackers right now? And my theory is that there's these 5 things that have occurred that are kind of innovations. They are beneficial things as a whole, but they've also disrupted the traditional ways that we've secured web, right? So one of the things, for example, is just the rapid growth, right? There's 197 million domain names registered today, right? At a rate of new ones are registered or exchange hands at a rate of 100,000 domains a day, or about 1 domain per second exchanges hands. So either newly registered or a new owner. Right, so if you think about the traditional way as an industry, we did web filtering. We basically, and I was there. I was before Barracuda. I was at a company called PureWire. Before that, I was at a company called Secure Computing. And we had a big web filtering database, and people licensed our web filtering database. And I was responsible for that team. We had a room of people, about 80 people, and everybody had a computer and a monitor. And we spent the days, and this is how it was when I got there. They've been doing this for 12 years before I got there. When I got there, they're sitting there and 80 people in the room, and we organized the web. Basically, people logged in every day, came to work, and said, oh, I think that's business. I think that's a weapons site. I think that's a drug site. I think that's porn. Ooh, that's porn. And, but that's how they kind of spent the day, is you just manually try to organize the web. And you just can't keep up. One domain name per second, you can't type fast enough, you can't react fast enough. So that's disrupted the traditional way that companies were dealing with this. Right? So a second thing is just whatever you want to call it, dynamic web apps, Ajax, Web 2.0. The point is, it's brought us great things like spreadsheets that run in a browser. Right? It's brought us great things like Outlook Web Access that feels like a desktop client, but it's now made a point where a remote website has more control over your browser and your computer than ever before. Right? And now one of the problems is, like, traditional application security used to mean I would download an executable file, I would virus scan that file, and say, okay, this app is safe or not. But nowadays, that app is just a web app, right? It's XML HTTP request. So how do you virus scan that? How do you tell if an app is safe or not? Like, who's in the middle looking at all the calls and deciding if an app is safe or not? Because you no longer have an executable you're downloading and virus scanning. Right? So that's a shift that we're having to deal with. These other two are pretty close related. These are really about the different types of devices and where people are accessing things from. One problem is, anybody here responsible for kind of corporate IT or corporate security at a business, at a company? Yeah? Handful of folks, right? So if you look back, 5 years ago or so, you built out these infrastructures that were very perimeter and gateway focused. And as long as somebody walked into the office and plugged into the Ethernet, man, they were safe. Right? But as soon as you picked up the laptop and you went across the street for coffee, you went across the country for a conference, they're outside the perimeter, they're outside your protection, they're naked, and they're exposed. And you can look at the stats here. Basically, a large percentage of people that leave the office end up being infected. A lot of those infections come from visiting malicious websites. Very similar to that is kind of new devices, like these mobile devices. How do you secure those things? So it's an avenue for attackers to reach you while you're exposed, and then bring that attack back into the network. This fifth change, this is one we'll spend all the time on, is user-generated content. If you think about just over the last several years how user-generated content has taken over. Right? Half of the top 100 websites in the world use user-generated content, whether that be like Facebook, Twitter, the obvious ones, or even normal brick-and-mortar sites that added social media components. Right? You go now to buy a CD online or to buy a refrigerator online, there's some social media, there's user-generated content, people are posting things. Well, the problem with that is, you think about the last time we educated the community about web security, we said, hey, when you get on your computer, if you go into a website, look for a little lock at the bottom of the browser. If you see that little lock, everything's fine. Right? You're laughing because that's the last time we told, think about your mother. When was the last time you told your mother anything about web security? Your grandma or your sister's look for that little lock at the bottom of the browser. As long as you see that, everything's fine. Right? And that mattered, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, it was okay, this is etoysbubble.com, and that's really them, you can trust them, move on. But now, it's no longer just a matter of this domain level trust. You have this question of, okay, user-generated content, behind that domain, there may be 500 million people. There may be 100 million people. So I don't need to just trust the domain. I need to understand each of these users, are they legitimate or not? Are they even real or not? Right? So there's this gap. There's this gap between kind of the trust model that's possible on the web today and kind of what the functionality of user-generated content has provided. And the attackers realize that this gap is there. There's this gap. I trust Facebook, so the average user by default trusts a lot of stuff that's on there. Or they trust Twitter, and they by default trust a lot of stuff that's on there. And so the attackers really leveraging this right now. They're pounding it. If you think about why half that spam disappeared, is because there's this big window and portal for them to carry out these attacks in social networks. So let's take a look at a couple things. Facebook. So here's a guy, he's a real guy, that's actually a friend of mine on Facebook. He was tagged in this person's photo album. And see, the photo got some of your attention, right? So even with the shadowing from the projector and even with the censored block that I put on there, right, it still is attention grabbing. And it's, hey, I check out this website I model for, sneakerhype.info, right? So like, okay, what's the big deal? Well, this shows up in my newsfeed, right? And if you look at the photos, they tag 50 people. They tag 50 people per photo that they post. And if you assume that every person has 1,000 friends, then there's 50,000 people that just received this link. Right? So again, think about if you're an attacker and you're trying to make money. Would you rather sit there and send 50,000 spam messages only to have them hit the wall of a spam firewall somewhere and hit the floor? Or just post one photo on Facebook and have 50,000 people see your link? Right? So if you think about the efficiencies, like basically the viral features that made these networks grow so much, the attackers are really learning how to take advantage of them. Right? So 50 people tag, 50,000 people advertise this website. So here's the website in this instance. It's selling shoes. It sells whatever kind of shoes you want. You like Nikes, you like UGG boots, whatever you want. It's selling the shoes. But if you look at the prices, they're actually below wholesale prices. So there's no way you're going to get a shoe and the Nike sign is going to fall off and there's glue around the tongue. And more realistically, you're going to put in your credit card information and then you're going to see a lot of charges that you have no idea where they came from. Right? But these are the types of just kind of basic stuff that's happening. Like jacking. How many have seen like jacking? A couple folks. So like jacking is interesting because what's happening is they're making use of the Facebook Open Graph API. And everybody wants, like me, like my company, like this article, like this thing. Well, what happens is in the newsfeed, you see, oh, my friend Scott over here liked this link. And the link is, the beautiful Marika shows her breasts on Italian TV. And so you're sitting at the office, it's early in the morning. Hey, he liked the link, maybe I'll take a look. Right? So you take a look, you click. And what happens is it takes you to this page. And you're almost there. It's a minute video. You're ready to press play. Just see it right quick before you get back to work, right? Well, the problem is when you click to play this, there's really no video. It's a image that is encapsulated with the Facebook Open Graph API to take your click and turn it into a like. Right? So you look at the code here, right? So this code is basically taking that entire image, a video frame, to function as a Facebook like button, right? So on the first time you click it, it's saying, okay, you liked it. And meanwhile, it's already posting on your profile and posting on all your friends' profiles that, hey, Paul likes Italian breasts as well, right? And I didn't even see any Italian breasts yet, right? So then the other thing it does is after I click on it, it is sitting there and also going to redirect me to some surveys. So they're taking other opportunities to monetize it. They're going to take you to some surveys where they get affiliate money back for pointing you to those. Right, so kind of see here. Once you click, you get a like on your Facebook profile, and then you get these surveys to fill out, and they make money. So it's interesting to see them really take advantage of something that's as seems as simple as innocent as a Facebook like. So malicious Facebook apps. So here's one. Anyone saw the movie Social Network? A couple of you guys, yeah. So if you remember when it came out. It was buzzing all over the world, right? In France, you see the pictures, the posters. In the U.S., everybody's talking about it. Everybody wants to go like code and make the formula, and they totally underestimated the technical work that it takes to actually build a website of that size. So I had all kind of friends like, hey, you know what I'm going to do this weekend? I'm going to build a social network, right? But if you look at it, so here's an app that was called the Social Network Closedown app, and it's saying, hey, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of the social network, has decided he's going to shut down your account unless you verify it. You have to click here to verify it. It's an official announcement, account verification starting today. And they use the Facebook logo, and it's showing up, and you don't know you're going, and you're like, okay, well, let me go. I don't want my Facebook account to disappear, right? So you click on it, it takes you to this. It takes you to this social network closedown official announcement. And it wants you to install the app. And you look at what this app wants to do. Right? This app would like to have access to all your basic information, which is your name, your profile pictures, all your friends, your phone number, your email address, just to start off with. It wants to also post to your wall. It would like to also be able to do this at any time. So whether you're logged into Facebook or even you're awake or asleep, it would like access to just, mess around with your Facebook page on your behalf. The last thing it wants to do here is manage your Facebook pages, which means if you are administrator for your company's Facebook page or for your churches or your soccer team, whatever it may be, it wants to manage those pages for you too. How greedy some of these apps are. You're like, oh, don't close me out of my account. Next thing you know, you just basically gave away the keys to your Facebook kingdom. Here's one from about a week ago. And it actually makes use of two things. It makes use of these photo taggings as well as making use of these Facebook apps. So this one's saying, hey, this guy was tagged in this album. This guy was tagged in this album. This album is called Hidden Truth. And it's claiming that it has all of this information about what happened with the tsunami in Japan and what happened with the World Trade Center attacks. It has all this information. It has pictures, and it's grabbing your attention. And there's a link. So you're like, hey, if I go click on this link, I'll see a website, and I'll get an explanation of what happened. Well, if you click that link, what happens is you get a couple series of redirections and brings you back to a Facebook app. This one's not as greedy. This one only wants access to all your information. It wants to post to your wall, and it would also like access to your photos, right? Because it wants to use your photos to lure more people in, right? And so if you look at it, it's like the Hidden Truth video app. This is pretty fresh. It had 0 users so far. So if you actually go to the application page, here's the application page. They didn't put a logo up. They don't have any ratings, don't have any monthly active users, but there's a developer, Kit Agron. Developer. So let's take a look at that developer profile. So Kit Agron. Kit, are you here? No? Kit's not here. So supposedly this is a developer that built that app, right? And here's the music she's into. Here are the movies that she's into. And so the attacker has taken the time to create this identity, create this profile, and make the account look more and more real. And we're seeing that a lot nowadays. They're actually taking the time to create fake profiles specific to geographic regions, right? And so they'll have one for something as specific as, a little town in a certain state. And they'll show that this person went to this college, this person went to this high school, and they work at this company, and use that to lure people that went to those places. So they have no problem making thousands and thousands of accounts and using them specifically to lure people from different regions. So Facebook examples, my last Facebook example here. So this automated social engineering. So this is a real chat session that popped up to me. And this lady, Kate Wrigley, is a lady that I work with at Barracuda. Worked with her for years at a couple different companies. And she is a sales engineer. So she's out on customer sites and dealing with things. And so she doesn't really ping me a lot through Facebook. So when I get something from her, it says, hey, Paul, got a second? I'm like, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? Customer site was a problem. And so I said, hey, what's up? And she writes back, she says, hey, I want you to try something real quick. I'm like, oh, man, she found a bug in one of the products or something. And I'm like, okay. So she says, okay, Paul, try this test and see what you get. I can't get over a 105. It's ridiculous. It gives me a link. Like, what is it? She says, oh, let me know what you get. Everyone so far beat me except Adam and yada, yada. So at this point, I'm like, wait a second. This doesn't sound like you. And I'm like, hey, where are you? And no more response, right? But obviously this wasn't her. This is an automated kind of bot sitting on her computer, had access to her Facebook credentials, and is sitting there going back and forth having a dialogue, right? So you think about user education. How do you teach a user to ignore this? I sat there and talked to it. They use very casual language. They go back and forth, estimate what you're going to say. And so, you think again about those spammers and why that spam volume went down so much. You're sitting there with a bunch of bots out there. You rather send spam messages out with those bots, or you rather sit there and do Facebook chats? Which was going to get you a higher click rate? So, that was a piece of malware running on that computer. One thing that we see is we get tens of thousands of pieces of malware a day across email and web. And so one thing that we've done to try to keep up with it, if not, you have to manually take one sample of malware, install it in an environment, run it, analyze it, see what it's going to do. We created this thing we call Maltrace. And basically it's a virtual environment for analyzing and observing malware. And so what we do is we let the malware come in and we run it on a VM. We let it run on a nice Windows VM with all the apps loaded, and it gets in there and it gets comfortable, right? It gets comfortable, it makes itself at home, it starts changing registry settings and starts calling out to command and control and sending out some spam and just does everything malware is supposed to do. But meanwhile, it's in a VM. It's not really connecting to anything. We're just capturing all the network traces and understanding what domains, what command and controls, what this and that. So it actually allows us to go through 60, 80,000 pieces of malware a day. and make network traces and turn that back into kind of interesting data we can use to kind of protect people. So it's kind of one thing that has been sparked by just all these different pieces of malware that we're seeing. The other thing, so that's kind of Facebook. I'm going to switch to Twitter a little bit here. You guys use Twitter? Yeah, I know. I saw a couple people that I've met on Twitter and just met in person for the first time. So it's amazing how much time people spend on Twitter, right? So I'm going to jump out here for a second. So we did this thing where we took a look at how much time, can you see that? Yeah, how much time people spend on Twitter. And this was around the time, you guys familiar with Kanye West? Yeah, Kanye West, music artist, yeah, okay. So this was the time he joined. He joined Twitter, and he sent some tweets, and like within a week, he had 500,000 people follow him, and everybody was talking about what he was tweeting, and everyone was talking about it. So we were like, wow, like how much time collectively did the world spend this week, like reading his tweets, right? And we've seen a similar example like a month ago with Charlie Sheen. You guys seen Charlie Sheen join Twitter? Yeah, so a similar example. But this is a view that we looked at when Kanye joined. And so we said, if you add up kind of all the people that followed him, and we actually went and looked as the number of followers increased, how much time you read each tweet. You spent a second or two reading each tweet. And how much time did the world spend reading this guy's tweets? And if one person had that much time, what could you do with it? Right? And so you add it all up. You actually came to, let me jump to the end here. So if you look at it, there's 400,000 people that followed him during that first week. And like, if you look at kind of 3 seconds per tweet, there were 2.5 million cumulative human minutes spent reading this one guy's tweets in 1 week. Right? So like, what could a person do with 2.5 million minutes? And so we kind of added up. And we said, okay, if you had 2.5 million minutes to spend, here's all the things you could do. First of all, you're interested in Kanye West, you could listen to each one of his albums 101 times each. Right? And then you can go and watch like every movie Kevin Bacon's been in 5 times each. Right? And then you can, matter of fact, you got some spare time, you can do Lindsay Lohan's jail sentence. And then while you're doing that, you might as well kind of sit back, you could do T.I.'s jail sentence, and you could do Lil Wayne's jail sentence. And then you could fly back from Chicago and Paris and back 12 times. And you can actually drive from New York, L.A. back and forth 10 times. You can actually take every Rosetta Stone course available. Right? You can sit through coursework at 3 colleges and get 3 degrees. Right? You can build a Habitat for Humanity home. You can go to Taylor Swift concert in every state. You can watch every NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball game this season. Right? You just kind of look at the time that humans spent. You can climb Mount Everest and Mount McKinley. And then you can watch every episode of South Park ever made 3 times each. You can get a lap dance from every stripper in Las Vegas. Right? So there's 100,000 registered strippers in Clark County, Nevada, if anyone's ever wondered. Right? And we estimated 3 minutes per dance. I mean, that's a personal preference, though. Right? But if you just look at the amount of time like humans spend on Twitter, it's kind of just a funny example of how much time goes into this. And this is reading one guy's tweets in 1 week. And so the point is, attackers realize there's a lot of eyeballs out there. See if I can take you back to where I was. Not exactly, but. So there's a lot of eyeballs out there. So the attackers are saying, how do I get in front of these eyeballs? So a couple things have happened. You look at Twitter, they've had a couple different types of incidents. They've had account hijackings, where the high-profile person had their account taken over, an attacker used it to either send funny messages out or malicious messages out and so forth. They had a series of things that were kind of Twitter security problems, like coding flaws that they had on their network that caused problems. And then they have this other problem of people using Twitter as a platform to distribute malicious links. Right? So they kind of have 3 different types of things that they've had to deal with over the years. So if we take a look at some of the account hijackings for a second. Here's one where New York Times has a publication called The Moment. So New York Times, pretty reputable publication. One of their publications, the account was hijacked. And someone just used it for pure spam. Like, hey, look here, take a look at Naked Cam. Like, wow, I thought you were New York Times, right? So here's one where someone took over BP America around the time of the oil spill. They took over the account and they're making comments about the guy that's in charge. Like, hey, we'll finish the oil spill cleanup as soon as we can find a double extra large wetsuit for this guy, right? Okay, so here's one, someone took over Lil Wayne's account. And they use it to make jokes about another artist called Soulja Boy. He's like, hey, I see you didn't sell that many albums. Don't worry, I'll send a PayPal to your account. I'll help you out, buddy. Right? So here's one that actually perhaps caused a little bit more confusion. So this is Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses. And someone sent a tweet out that said, hey, all the upcoming Guns N' Roses shows are canceled. Forget about it. Go call somebody and get your money back. Right? So how many people were just not happy that day? Right? So, you look at some of these are funny examples, but just the ability of having an account hijacked and taken over and using that as a soapbox to get your message across, whether it be a joke or whether it be something malicious. If you look in the neighborhood of security flaws, there's been a few problems over the years. I mean, one is, you guys remember this one? This 25-year-old kid from France broke into the internal administration system over at Twitter. So he basically broke into the back-end support system and used it to access accounts like the President of the U.S., Britney Spears, Ashton Kutcher. He actually went to court in March of last year. They sentenced him to 5 months. They suspended it, but he basically broke into the back end and had full access to Twitter support system. Another problem that they had, this was last year, was a thing called forced follow. Did anyone hear of this? They kept it pretty quiet. So forced follow, there was some code sitting there in the back of Twitter that if you sent a tweet and it said accept, yeah, okay. If you sent a tweet and it said accept username, so, if it said accept Adam, then it would make Adam follow me. Right? So I just went around. I wanted to make everybody in here follow me except Bob. You're following me now. And so there was this logic that was built into Twitter from the beginning. It's been there from day one. Somehow they forgot about it and no one ever stumbled across it. But it was this thing to force someone to follow you. And so this 17-year-old kid in Turkey found it, notified them, and they actually fixed it. But it's a kind of interesting problem that was sitting out there. There was a cross-site scripting problem back in September on Mouseover, where you can on-mouse over a link and it would actually retweet that tweet on your behalf. Right? That same month, they had another problem that was a CSRF problem, where it would post a link to your account whenever you clicked their link. So one was a mouse server, one took an actual click to do. So this is an actual snapshot from Twitter's blog. Like, hey, a malicious link is making the rounds that will post a tweet to your account when clicked. We fixed the exploit and in the process of removing the offending tweets. Right, so they've had kind of a series of these types of problems. They've done a couple things to try to address some of them. Right, so one thing is this URL shortener, Twiddle. Has anyone ever seen a Twiddle link? Anyone ever heard of Twiddle? Yeah? So, yeah, it's interesting. So the beginning of last year, they came out, and you guys are familiar with Bitly, like all these URL shorteners, right? The Twitter came out and said, hey, we're going to do our own URL shortener. And the world was like, wow, why are you doing that to Bitly and your other partners? And their answer was, oh, we're doing it for security measures. We need to analyze all the content that's coming in, so we're going to have our own URL shortener so that we can analyze the content and make sure it's safe before we post the links. Well, they announced it, and we really haven't seen a whole lot from it yet. In August of last year, they rolled out OAuth, right? So they made it mandatory that if you want to give a third party or you want to give a different app access to your Twitter account, then you have to use OAuth, where you can give them a token instead of having to actually give them your username and password. So that's actually a step in the right direction. Let's take a look at some of the malware that's been out there, like actually people using Twitter to propagate their links. So funniest video ever. This was one that went around, and it was saying, ha, 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 this is the funniest video ever. This is the funniest video ever. And it was providing links, and it used different keywords. Hey, Justin Bieber, Stacey Dash, Allspill, all these different things, Olympics, like all types of stuff to get your attention. And it provided this link, and it was actually installing a banking Trojan that was an information stealer, right? So, that's one example. Here's another example of the Bifrost Trojan. They were using accounts that were talking about the stuff that was going on in Israel at the time, right? So, hey, yada, yada, Gaza Strip, click this link. Like, this guy was a little bit lazy. He's actually put in a full URL with RAR files and EXEs. So if you're on Twitter and you're clicking on an exe, I don't know about it. But so he didn't even use a URL shortener. A lot of guys are using URL shorteners. Here's the one that was using Google shortener and then pointing to Neosploit. So it actually, they compromised the website of a furniture manufacturer in France. They were hosting the exploit kit from there, and it went from your Google shortener to taking you to that guy and installing Neosploit on your system. A lot of examples of rogue antivirus, right? So this is using Google shortener and saying, hey, a very good antivirus. Hey, a very good antivirus. And you click this thing, and it says, hey, here's an antivirus you can install. And sure enough, it's not a real one. Here's an example of using rogue antivirus in connection with trending topics, right? So you guys are familiar with trending topics. There's different topics that people are talking about every day. So on this particular day, you see like Follow Friday, TGIF, Jay-Z, Pirate Day. And so here are 3 different accounts talking about 3 different things. One's talking about Pirate Day, one's talking about Follow Friday, one's talking about TGIF, and they're pointing to 3 different URLs, totally different URLs. And then what happens is all of those were redirecting you to securityland.cn, which was a traffic distribution system for rogue antivirus. And then you have this lovely decoration on your desktop, right? So you're there trying to find out about this Pirate Day movie. Next thing you know, you have a new decoration on your desktop. So this is kind of what the average user is seeing on Twitter on a regular basis. So one of the areas that we've been spending some time is exploring how can you build a reputation system for social networks, right? In the same way that we've built over the years, we've built reputation systems for like email, right? You familiar with like IP reputation systems for email? Right? The world went from like content-based filtering to kind of IP-based blacklist to IP-based reputation systems for email. It's one of the things that, in my opinion, kind of saved email. It kind of kept to the point that the industry could keep 90+% effective catch rates and stop spam from showing up in inboxes, because it was all about understanding the IP as an identity and taking the behavior of that IP and turning it into an indication of this guy useful or not, right? So how can you take that same concept and apply it to a social network? How can you apply it to a particular account? How can I look at your behavior and decide if you're a real account or not, or if you're a legitimate account or not? And so that was kind of the goal, is to, based on someone's behavior, not wait and to read their content, not do signature scans and URL filtering and stuff on the content, but if I can understand the behavior of one account versus another, how can I use that to decide if you're legitimate or not? So we built this system that it goes through the Twitter stream to get information. It also does some queries to get information. But the goal, again, is not content-based, purely activity-based. So if you think about Twitter, what are the activities? I mean, basically, what do you know about an account? I know when you join. I know how many times and what frequency you tweet. I know how many people follow you, and I know how many people you follow. And I can look at the relationships between those things. So just based on that, how can I begin to figure out who's good and who's bad? So there's a few things. One thing that we need to look at first is kind of what's the baseline? What's a normal user? What's a normal user? There's 100 million plus Twitter users. What does a normal user look like, feel like? And so we created a pretty low bar. We said, okay, you're a true Twitter user if you've tweeted at least 10 times and 10 people follow you and you follow 10 people. You're a true Twitter user. You at least turned the thing on, right? You kick the tires. Well, if you look at all the accounts on Twitter, what we've seen is less than half of them qualify for that low bar. So 43% of them are a true Twitter user. That's 10 follows, 10 tweets, 10. So you have over half of the network that's just sitting out there with accounts. Right? So that's the first thing. Half of the network is just sitting out there with accounts. So then you start to look at, okay, well, how many people are you following? Right? How many people are you following? And what happens is, if you look at Twitter as a whole, I mean, basically 16% of the accounts are following nobody. Right? Almost, you add 16 plus 27, almost half of the accounts are following less than 10 people. Right? So you think about the whole network, 16% of them are following nobody. So you have a Twitter account, you're not following anybody. What do you see when you log in? Right? So you start to think about what's the normal user, trying to profile and baseline a normal user so we can figure out what are the outliers. Right? So this is interesting just stuff about kind of how people are using the network, because all you ever hear is, oh, Twitter's growing, it's growing, it's growing, it's growing, but you never really hear data about, okay, how are people actually using it? So the fact that 16% of the accounts, I mean, was that 1 in every 8, 1 in every 7 accounts not following anybody? You know how it happens. You can log into your Twitter client, you're not following anybody, you get an empty screen, right? So other thing that we start to look at is the relationship between how many people you're following and how many people are following you. And so the question is, are people using Twitter like a normal social network where you have a two-way connection or a two-way graph? Right? You look at Facebook, as soon as we're Facebook friends, it's a two-way relationship. I'm your friend, you're my friend. Whereas on Twitter, there's one-way relationships, right? I follow you, and then you decide whether or not you want to follow me. So we wanted to look at, were people using it in more of a two-way connection mode, or were there people that were more so consumers of information and more so producers of information? And so what we looked at is basically 43% of the accounts on Twitter have the same number of friends and followers. So the same being plus or minus 5, right? So 43% of the accounts, almost half of the accounts out there, are using it as a full kind of two-way connected graph relationship. But then you look, there's 34% that have more followers. They're a little bit more producers of content. And then there's 23% that have more people that they're following. So they're a little bit more consumers of content, right? So I get to kind of why that's important here. The other thing that we want to measure is what we call the Twitter crime rate. Right? The Twitter crime rate, what's that? That's basically, if you look at all the accounts that were created any given month on Twitter, what percent of those accounts were kicked off? Right? They violated the terms of service and they were suspended. Not they quit, they were suspended, right? So if you look at any particular month, what percent of the accounts were suspended? So to look at that, the other thing we looked at was the growth. We look at every month, because the Twitter account will tell you what day they joined. So if you look at enough Twitter accounts, I can see what day you joined. I can kind of really look at the growth cycle of Twitter. And so that's what we did. We went back and looked at, since 2006, what was the growth cycle of Twitter? So one interesting thing that we stumbled across is there's this period at the end of 08, right, between November of 08 and April of 09. If you look at the top 100 users on Twitter right now by number of followers, the top 100 people on Twitter, half of them came in the same 6-month period. Right, so pick your favorite celebrity, like whether it's Martha Stewart or Kim Kardashian or 50 Cent or you know, whatever you're into, half of the celebrities came in the same 6-month period. So I don't know if they all called each other their like celebrity committee meeting and they're like, okay, we're going to join Twitter now. But if you look back, there's literally, look at the top 100 people on Twitter, 50% of them joined in the same 6-month period. So what happened is the growth rate of Twitter went up from 2% to 20%, right? So all the users, you can see kind of the Twitter account creation during that time period, right? And what do we know in security? Kind of wherever the users go is kind of where the attackers will come. And so we want to measure that. We want to see, like, how is that really happening? How fast is that happening? How quickly are the attackers responding? And so what we looked at is this measures the crime rate, right? What percent of accounts are suspended that were created in any given month? So since the beginning of the network, 2006, Twitter was averaging about 1.2% of accounts that were created in any given month were suspended. 2007, it went up to 1.7%. 2008, it was at 2.2%. Then you had this red carpet era. And during the red carpet era, it went from 2% to 3.3%. So it increased 60%, right, during this red carpet era. But then, kind of within 4 months after that, it jumped up to 12%. So it went from 2 to 3 to 12 as the users increased, right? So 12%, looks like 1 in every 8 accounts that's created suspended. And that's just the people they're catching, right? Are they catching half? I doubt it. Are they catching 10%? Maybe. Catching 20%? So they're not catching 99%, right? So it just shows the ability of the attacker to respond quickly. Oh, wait, all the users are here? All right, I'm over here now. And dig in. So kind of with that understanding, we start to then look at, okay, how do we kind of find these accounts? How do we find these accounts proactively? So we take a look. So what this is looking at is the delta between how many people you're following, how many people do you have as followers, right? How many followers you have, how many people you're following. And the red are suspended accounts, and the green are still active accounts, right? And so what you see is that people that were suspended had a larger delta between their friend count and their follower count than normal legitimate users. Well, why is that? Why is that? Well, you look at, you're kind of creating a fake account on Twitter and you're trying to get a bunch of followers. What do? The first thing you go do is you go follow a lot of people, right? You go follow a lot of people and you hope that they follow you back. And the attackers have tools, right, to automate this for them. They'll go follow 1,000 people. They'll wait. 100 of them will follow back. They'll unfollow. They'll go follow the next 1,000 people. Try to recruit people to follow. So as they crank these accounts up, they go and they follow a lot of people. And then once they're successful, they actually unfollow. They unfollow most of them. So then they end up here. They end up with way more followers than they have following. So they go back and forth between these two sides of things, trying to create and harvest that account. And so you see a pretty big distinction between legitimate accounts and illegitimate accounts in that friend-follower delta. So that's kind of just one data point. Another thing that we want to look at was kind of how much does someone tweet? How much do you tweet? And so you could see, I can see, like Twitter API will tell you the number of tweets you've sent. You sent this many tweets, you sent this many tweets. Well, the number of tweets that you sent isn't as interesting as like the rate, right? If you send 100,000 tweets, have you been on Twitter for 2 days or 5 years? So if you look at the average, and just basically here's the average number of tweets that you send per day. That's what we call the tweet number, right? You got a sleep number, you got a tweet number. And it was kind of interesting at first because we said, oh, okay, let me see what my tweet number is. And my tweet number is like 1.4. Right, so some days I tweet twice, and some days I don't tweet. And so my tweet number was 1.4. The guy sitting next to me in the office was like 3.1. What are you doing all day? Right? And so then we have some friends that tweet a lot. And we're like, hey, let's look at this guy, George, see what he does. Wow, 30. How do you have a tweet number of 30? Right? Like, what do you every 15 minutes? Like, get a job, right? So we start to look. And so this is if you can read this, this shows the percentage of accounts that have tweet numbers in different ranges. So, about 80% of the accounts out there tweet less than once a day on average. Right? There's 10% that tweet between 1 and 4 times a day. 5% that tweet between 5 and 9 times a day. 3% that tweet between 10 and 100. 0.2% that tweet over 100 times. Who's tweeting over 100 times a day? What's interesting about that, there's 0.2% of the population, but if you do the math, they can actually represent about 38% of all the traffic on Twitter. And because of the number of times that they tweet, right, then you compare like someone tweeting 200 times to someone tweeting, one time every 2 days, this 0.2% of the population can represent about 40% of the overall tweets on the network. So it's pretty unbalanced if you look at it. So, if you look at a reputation system, what you want to do is take different features. I want to take just different characteristics and use that to basically profile. Right? There's a lot of talk in the world about, profiling people at the airport and this and that, but that's really what it comes down to. There's certain characteristics that are indicative of a good Twitter account and a bad Twitter account. And I want to take those features and use a classifier to show me, okay, some separation between two data sets. Right, so just looking at these two basic features for a second, looking at like tweet number as well as this friend-follower ratio. I just look at those two features. What can I do? So here's some manual stuff we can show. So here I'm looking at high tweet numbers and high friend-follower deltas. Right, so your friend-follower delta is about the 2,500 range. You have tweet numbers over 100. What do you see? You start to see some spammy stuff. You start to see, earn money today. Revs by seller, my sports tracker. So you see some real spammy accounts. You have high tweet numbers and you have a high friend follow delta. So these are accounts that have like really out there following a lot of people, trying to attract traffic and followers back to them. Right? So they're kind of scammy accounts. If you look at the other direction, these are still people with even higher tweet numbers, 100 to 400 tweets a day. And they have negative follower friend deltas, which means that they've gone out, recruited people to follow them, and then they've unfollowed them. Right? So they have this negative number between their follower-friend ratio. So you look at that, you start to really see some scammers coming out. You have voucher code, you have instant biz tips, you have cam for porn, right? Tweet stock tips. You start to be able to get some separation kind of just based on some features. I never looked at their content. But I just looked at two things. I looked at their tweet number, and I looked at their friend-follow ratio, and I can tell you that I don't want anything to do with these accounts, right? So, just an example of kind of building user reputation based on behavior features. So here's a Twitter account, Download Heaven. And if you never looked at Download Heaven, what you know is, what you can see is they have a very low friend-follow ratio, very high negative friend-follow delta, and tweet number over 100. So we kind of look at that and say, okay, well, let's see, are they good or bad? So Download Heaven, actually, I'll go back. Wait, no, is that a way? Come on, participate. There we go. So Download Heaven runs this website, right? Download Heaven. If you look up the Google Safe Browsing diagnosis for Download Heaven, well, in the last 90 days, they had 15 pages that resulted in malicious software being downloaded. Right? The malicious software included 5 Trojans and 1 exploit, and it redirects and hosts that on 2 different domains. There appears to be 1 domain action as an intermediary. And there's a neighborhood of like 5 different examples of Twitter accounts all registered to the same person, all registered to the same set of domains. Right, so you started off with nothing more than, what's your friend follow delta and what's your tweet number. And sure enough, it pointed me to a malicious account that's been proven out over the last few months to be a source of malicious software. So there's kind of more of that. But as I kind of look at the time, here's a tool that we created. It's called Profile Protector. It's a free thing. It's profileprotector.com. It's a free website that you can go and will scan your Facebook profile as well as your Twitter feed and look for malicious activity. So you just basically go, you log in, and scan your Facebook profile, scan your Twitter feed for malicious activity. So it's something to take a look at. So the last topic I want to touch on, as I about 10 minutes here. So we looked at Twitter, we looked at Facebook. One thing that's happening a lot is people using Twitter a lot as a search engine, right? There's some people that go on, I follow you guys as friends. There's some people that go to Twitter to look for information. I'm looking for what's going on right now. I'm using it as a search engine. And Twitter, as well as the other search engines, are becoming a very kind of interesting data point for attackers. Because as the web is growing so quickly, the search volumes that are occurring every day are higher than ever. The number of searches that happen on Google, the reason Google's such a huge company is people use it to search. Same thing for Bing, same thing for Yahoo. So the attackers will realize, oh, there's a lot of eyeballs. How do I get in front of those eyeballs? So they're using search engine optimization to kind of make themselves rank high for certain searches. They're actually going out and compromising certain sites that already have high rankings. So what we wanted to do was understand kind of how much is this happening? How often is this happening? So we built this thing that we call a search engine malware crawler. And it does just that. It goes to each of the engines, and it says, hey, what are the popular search terms right now? And it goes and just searches for them. And it looks at the results and analyzes them and look for malware. So it basically just does what a user would do. I figure out what are the popular search terms for each engine, because they'll all tell me like hourly or daily, depending on how they're configured. I ask you, hey, Google, what's the popular search terms? Those, okay, let me go search for them. Let me take the results, and then I'll go analyze them. Same thing with Bing, same thing with Yahoo, same thing with Twitter. And so that's what we did. We've been running this for, last year and a half or so. So here's a snapshot of some of the results. So 4 different search engines. These are 153 days, the last 5 months of 2010. So in a 5-month period, you ask every search engine regularly, what are the popular search terms? That gets you 157,000 popular topics, right? If you actually go and pull the results for those, that gets you 36 million search results. So all we're doing is saying, hey, what's popular? Give me search results. Let me see if I find any malware. So what do you think? We found any malware? Yeah, maybe a little bit. So we found 34,000 pieces of malware. Again, just looking at top search results for popular terms. We didn't go looking for, hey, let me go find screensavers and see what I can find. Let me go over here and search for malware and see what I can find. It was whatever was popular right then. We searched for it and got the results. 34,000 pieces of malware. Right? So that on average is 1 in every 1,000 search results led to malware. Right? And on average, basically 1 in every 5 search topics led to malware. Right? If you look at the distribution of where that malware was, it's interesting. Google was 38%, Yahoo 30%, Bing 24%, Twitter at 8%. So two interesting points here. One, the last time we did this, the middle of last year, Google was 69%. Right? Now, what happened is the amount of malware found daily on Google remained about the same. So it didn't go down in half. The amount on the other engines went up. Right? So we're finding about almost twice as much malware at the end of the year as we were finding in the middle of the year. And it's not that the proportion that they look at it, and Google probably, I think they did an announcement, hey, look, our search percent went down, according to Barracuda Labs. Like, no. Like, your actual number of malwares a day actually remained consistent. It's just that the attackers, my opinion is that the attackers were trying this out on Google. Like, oh, man, this works. They went over to Bing and started to do the same thing. They went over to Yahoo and started to do the same thing. That's why the numbers went up. Same thing on Twitter. And the reason, in my opinion, that the number on Twitter is low compared to the others is because, a search engine, what a search engine is supposed to do is take results for you and make them relevant. It's supposed to go find what you're looking for and help you find it. Whereas Twitter, you know the way search works on Twitter. It's basically, what term do you want? All right, that's the latest snapshot of who's talking about that. Right? There's no relevance. There's no ranking. And so that works for and against the attacker in that they don't have the opportunity to do search engine optimization and make their sites rank higher. So attacker, if you're smart and you have resources, you have the opportunity to get your attack higher in the Google search results than you do on Twitter. With Twitter, it's a gamble. It's just you're playing the odds, right? It's like playing roulette. Like, put my data in there. Did it get picked? Put my data in there. Did it get picked? So that's why kind of artificially the number for Twitter is lower because attackers don't have the ability to use search engine optimization in their favor, right? So a quick example of some search engine malware. So anybody know this guy? Yeah? I think he plays basketball or something. Yeah. Right. So if you guys remember, last year he was changing teams. Remember, he used to have a jersey that said Cleveland, and he was changing teams, and it was a big deal. Right. It was a big deal in certain parts of the world, and a lot of people were searching for, what team is he going to go to? Is he going to New York? Is he going to L.A.? What team is he going to? So a lot of people were searching for. They were looking for his Twitter feed. They were looking for information about where is LeBron James going to play. And so here's a result from Google. If you search for LeBron James Twitter, this is a result from first page of Google. It's like, hey, right here's LeBron James Twitter. And if you click on this thing, it says, okay, wait, if you want this content, you just need to update your Adobe Flash Player. You just need version 11. Adobe hasn't released version 11 last time I checked. Right, it wasn't on my computer, so I'm like, okay, cool. Let me get version 11. You go ahead, it gives you an executable to download, and the next thing you know, what do you get? New decoration on your desktop. Right, so here we are, first page results for Google for a trending topic, and you're basically getting hit with rogue antivirus. So those are the types of things that the attackers are up to on the search engine malware side and kind of how it relates to social networks. So my last point, you remember I started off talking about spam. While the spam volume has been going down and all this other stuff is going up. So I want to take a look at some of my favorite spammers. Right? So you've been following the spam problem for a while. You go back to like 2003, right, 2004. There were some famous spammers. You guys remember these guys at all? Alan Rowski, Scott Richter? No? Well, Alan Rowski, remember there used to be a top 10 list of spammers? And so there's a top 10 list of spammers that was published all the time. And it was like monthly it would change based on their spam volume. And this guy, Alan Rowski, used to always be number one. He was sending hundreds of millions of messages a day, almost, right? But this guy, Scott Richter, he would be number 2, but he would also be number 9 because he had 2 different companies, right? And these guys used to brag. They used to brag. One of them called himself the godfather of spam. The other one was like, I'm the king of spam. So I'm the godfather of spam, I'm the king of spam. It's like James Brown and Michael Jackson, right? And so, one of the guys bragged about, I made $3 million this summer doing pump and dump. Right, and this guy's, I sold 20,000 copies of the Rack card deck before I ever printed them. I made $1 million in card decks before they were ever printed. Right, so these guys were raking in the money. Then they started to have some problems. One of these guys had the FBI raid his apartment. The other guy was sued by New York Attorney General, by MySpace. So they both ran into these problems. So the point is, let's take a look at what are these guys up to today. Right, what are they up to? So Alan Rowski, after the FBI raided his apartment in 2005, he is in the middle of a 4-year sentence at a federal prison. Okay? His buddy, Scott Richter, after a bunch of lawsuits, New York Attorney General, all this, that, and that, he just started a social gaming company. Right? So you think about who's behind these things, right? These are the same guys that are trying to figure out ways to monetize their skill set illegally. The same guys that were sending email spam, the same guys that were sending phishing attacks, the same guys doing social networking threats. So I don't know if anybody wants to install a game from Lunatic Games. Let me know how that works out, right? So With that, I'll wrap up. But basically what we saw is there's a lot of interesting stuff that's been happening on the web. Social networks are growing, the viral features are growing, the web is growing 1 new domain name per second. All these things are happening, but it's creating this window for the attackers. It's creating this window because it's truly disrupting the traditional ways that we secure our users. And so we looked at a few different ways that the attackers are taking advantage of it. And so kind of with that, this is how we're spending our time at Barracuda Labs, kind of looking at more ways to be more proactive about building reputation systems for these networks, looking for ways to actually go out and find the threats before users stumble across them. So with that, take a look at Profile Protector as a free tool. Take a look at Barracuda Labs if you're not doing that already. There's some more threat reports that dig into this in more detail. And so thanks for spending the first part of your day with me.